Welcome back to the Purple Bloom podcast with Lauren and Alisha, and today we're going to get into a really fun episode about careers in Korea and Japan, teaching. We're going to get into the interviewing process, how to find these career opportunities, and the visa process, our own experiences, and a bunch of fun stuff. So let's get started. So before we get into all of the fun nitty-gritty things that go into like an overseas career where you're teaching English as a second language in Korea and Japan, Alisha, why would you want to even do that? Why would you want to travel all the way to a different country to have this kind of career?
So my journey started back in 2010, which is when I was first introduced to K-pop. And for me, that was like when I first kind of also found out about Korean culture in general. So not only was I learning about the K-pop music, which was very different in 2010 than it is now. K-pop of the 2010s was...
It was
going through some things. It's going through some things back then. But yeah, I started learning about the culture, about the food, about the language. And so slowly I was like, I really am interested, genuinely interested, and I want to one day go over there. So how can I do that? And then I don't even know how I found out about it, but I realized that you can teach English over there. But at the time, I was working on my associate's degree, and I didn't have a bachelor's degree yet. And that was kind of the minimum requirement for like a program like EPIC, which is a teaching English abroad program that works with public schools in South Korea. So that kind of made me like kind of think to myself, okay, I have to finish my bachelor's degree because I have to go over there. Like I have to experience this firsthand. So back then, it was more about experiencing the culture, and teaching was just the way to do it. And now that we've come much further and I am actually in like education, it's now more about finding like a good job that I think I'd be happy at and good at teaching wise, but also that will give me enough time to experience like the cultural side of Korea that I want to experience. So
yeah, it's kind of like you're getting older and you're understanding like what the career means. It's not just like, oh, I want to go over and experience. It's like, I want to go over there and do actually good work and like have like a nice purpose and really do good things for these kids. But also like you want to, be able to have time to explore and do and really experience the culture that you've wanted to experience since 2010, which is crazy. That's like a decade, right? Over a decade.
I know. It's been so long.
Yeah.
And South Korea is where I always had my eyes set on. But you had your sights set on Japan. So how did you find out about teaching in Japan?
Yeah. So with Japan, I, of course, as we've stated in the podcast before, I've been really into anime when I was in high school. And from anime, of course, that's where that's where I found out about opportunities like JET, which is the same thing as EPIC. So it's teaching English over in Japan. It's one of the better programs to do that with. It's also one of the larger programs to do that with. So, there's faults and then there's positives, right? There's pros and cons to the program, just like any other program. But I found out about the JET program when I was in high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. And I can't remember if they required a bachelor's or not at that time. I'm sure they did. But I was like, I'm going to do this after high school. And then it became, I got to get my bachelor's first. Wait a minute. So I go in and I got my bachelor's. I didn't really know what I wanted to do because I knew I didn't want to do JET for the rest of my life. It was always going to be like a year or two and then come on back over here because I have dyslexia, and the kind of dyslexia that I have, it's like harder to learn languages with. So I wasn't like banking on the fact that I would be fluent in a language, in like a nice amount of time. I don't know if I've said that before on the podcast, but yeah. But anyway.
No.
So that's
really interesting. I didn't know that.
So that's how I got into it and how I figured out about the programs and everything. And that's why I've always been into Japan. And we were talking a little bit before this episode, and we were talking about how like crazy it is that like I've always had my sights set on Japan. But when BTS came into my life, like around 2016, then it was like, oh, well, I could go to Korea. But it was also like, well, I've spent so much of my life wanting to go to Japan. Like I have to honor that and like pay respect to that first before I just swerve really hard. But it's kind of like you've always wanted to go to Korea, but now there's an opportunity in Japan, so you're going to Japan. But so it's kind of like crazy how sometimes it doesn't work out how we think it's going to.
Yes. And I think it's also because we started on with this idea so long ago. You know, you change so much in that time, and regulations change and opportunities change. So I think we've both like kind of gone with the flow at the very least when it's come to all of these things.
Yeah.
So
I feel like you got to go with the flow or else you're not going to get anything.
Right.
I mean, you might, but it might take a long time.
That's going to be right. That's kind of like our motto out of 2020.
Yeah.
Like we must go with the flow.
You got it. Which also, we're going to get into how 2020 has affected our plans too. Because, of course, pandemic doesn't leave anything untouched in her wake. So, Alisha, you know a lot about the Korean industry regarding these programs and how it works and all the ins and outs of it and all the different places that you should be looking for these opportunities, because there's a lot of different places.
There are. The most common program that we mentioned earlier would be EPIK, EPIK. So that is English program in Korea, and that is specifically connected to public schools that are within the Seoul region. So not necessarily all in Seoul, the city, but like just like the general region and the surrounding areas. And then that is, if you apply to the EPIK program, you are kind of like the only English teacher in the school, unless it's a very large school and you have many students, and then they'll have more. But it's kind of a lot of responsibility on you to lesson plan and create activities and be able to teach many different levels of English. So this is like the state program. It does come with a lot of benefits, which is normally severance. So at the end of your contract, if you successfully complete your whole contract, you usually get a month's wages paid to you as a bonus. Health insurance, so the national insurance of Korea, you'll pay equal parts that and your employer, so it's 50-50. So you'll get health insurance.
Nice.
Pension contributions, which I think when you pay for health insurance, you pay for pension at the same time. So again, when you're ready to leave Korea, you can cash that out if you are a U.S. citizen. It might be different if you are not. And then you work the typical hours for the school, whatever the school hours might be. It might be elementary, middle, or high. I think it's usually elementary, though. I'm not sure if they really do high school programs. But regardless, so it's kind of, I know JET is a little bit similar in that you can't really pick where you're going, like region-wise or school-wise. So it's kind of a hit or miss, and you've kind of got to be really open to any of those possibilities with EPIK.
Yeah.
And there's also a companion program called GEPIK. It's GEPIK. And that is for the more rural areas of South Korea, far away from Seoul. So that's also another option if you want to. It's kind of the same thing where you're probably going to be the only English teacher at your school, except you'll probably need to know a lot more Korean in those areas to get by, because there probably won't be very much English around or people who speak English.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there is a large expat community in Korea in general. So you can find people everywhere now who have been through EPIK, GEPIK, or any of the other Hagwon teaching positions that they have. But yeah, so this is like the light version. So we're not like going to go super into like the whole process, because the process is very long for applying for visas. But essentially an instructor visa in Korea is an E2 visa. That's the visa you want to come on. And it's tied to your school. So you can't like job hop, as I'd like to say it, because I am a chronic job hopper. You can't, in America, I am a chronic job hopper. So you can't do that if you're on a visa. Your visa is tied to your school. So that means if you're on an E2 visa, you are kind of locked into whatever school you're into for the year. So again, if you're not like an adventurous spirit and you're not like open to kind of not having control over where you're going or what your school might be like, or you feel like your Korean might be limited, then maybe EPIC is not like the right program. And that's okay, because there are so many ways to find English teaching jobs in Korea. So EPIC is like the official like state-run way of finding an English teaching job. And those are during school hours. But Korea also has many hagwons, which are after-school English schools. How do I say that? They're like cram schools. Right.
Yeah.
Basically. So after Korean students go to school, they go to another school to listen to English. So it's a little bit easier, again, to go through that program, go through that method of finding a job, because that is just you usually going through a website or an agency and then saying, okay, I kind of want to work with this age group. I would prefer these hours. Most hagwons are after school. So it's like 3 to 10, 2 to 9, like they're evening hours most of the time. And oftentimes they won't require you to have all of the educational requirements that something like an international school would require for you. So an international school is at like a whole other level, and they usually require some sort of education qualification, like a teaching license. Whereas if you do EPIC, or if you go through a agency to find a job at a hagwon, you usually only need a Tefl Certificate. So teaching English as a foreign language, 120-hour certificate. You can find them everywhere. You can Google, literally. So those are kind of like your different options, and really it depends on what you want. So if you really want the control over where you're going, it's really to your benefit to go through an agency or a recruiter and find a job where you know you want to go, teaching the age group that you want to teach. Like maybe elementary school is not for you. You want like the middle schoolers or the older kids, or maybe you want the kindergarteners, and having that flexibility. The only difference is in terms of EPIC versus hagwons is that hagwons are their own independent business. It's kind of like you coming to America and saying, I want to work for this small family-owned business. And so you got to be really careful, again, about what you're going into, because there's only so much you can find out through an interview on Zoom, Like you don't necessarily know all your coworkers or what the kids are like or what the environment is like. So, and that's a risk with any job that you're going overseas for, Korea or Japan or anywhere else. And the other thing is, sometimes, depending on if it's a big franchise school or if it's like a small independent school, again, your visa is tied to the school. There have been occasions where schools have shut down, and then you're in a really difficult position because your visa is tied to the school, and now the school is not there. And so it gets a little bit complicated with legal issues and how you can get permission to work for another school. It can be done, though. There are many forums and groups on Facebook, and if you Google around, you will find them. And we will put some links. I'll put some places where I have job hunted personally to find jobs. So if anyone's interested. And like I said, it's not to scare you guys off. Like, this is literally like, I like to give people 100% of the information. So I'm giving you all of the information that I can in a really condensed way so that you know exactly what you're coming into. So I feel like I've talked for ages, Lauren. It's your turn.
I love it. No, Alisha is a researcher. She loves to research and like figure everything out. And like,
Truly.
That's like one of the things that I love about her. And that's why you know so much about like these programs and like the goods and the bads of them. Because like if I was looking into like a program like this, I wouldn't think to look up like, oh, is this like a small, you know, after school family business that they're just like using to teach, you know, kids with. And like, I wouldn't think about like, oh, like this interview went well, but what about like, what about the coworkers? What about the, you know, how long are we actually going to be there? What's the pros and the cons of the job, you know? So it's good that like you have all that. And you were talking about the certificates a little bit too. And don't you have one of the certificates, like the Tefl certificate?
Yes, I do have a Tefl certificate because before I decided to go like really and get my teaching license, I was like, let me just get that and I'll go with that. And then me being who I am, I was like, no, I want a nice job. So I went back and got my teaching license. But no, you can totally just go get a 120-hour teaching certificate. And that is a very good way to, if you've never taught before, understand a little bit of the basics of teaching. So you're not completely unprepared when you go there.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing something like that, or just teaching, doing something like I do music, like I teach music. So I mean, like something like that, like at least like I have experience in teaching. I know what it's like before you go over there, because then you have a new culture, you have that culture shock. And then on top of that, you have now like a whole new job that you have to get used to, which I mean, if that's your kind of personality, you like that, those new and those different things, of big changes, you like constantly trying to keeping yourself on your toes like that, then that is like the perfect experience. But if you're kind of like I like comfort and I like routines and stability, so if you you kind of gravitate towards more of things like that, then I mean maybe like I would just definitely recommend what you said, like getting like a nice, what was it, like 120-hour teaching certificate or something like that. But how was it getting your Tefl certificate though? Like, did you have to go through classes and take tests and stuff, or were you out there like teaching more, or how did that go?
If you do an online only program, most of the time they don't require you to have any teaching hours. So you can do all the courses. The one that I did was self-paced, so you could work through the courses at your own rate. The course was open for a certain amount of time, so you needed to finish the whole course within that time limit. And I think it was a lot of time though. I think it was like 6 months or something.
Wow.
But they're not excessively long courses. They're pretty straightforward. And if you are good at studying, I don't think that it would be too challenging. And you do have tests for every unit. So some schools, if they're really picky, will require you to do an online teaching component where you actually do have to like demonstrate to someone that you can teach. It's not always in a real classroom. Sometimes it's just in a classroom with other people who are taking the Tefl class that you're in. I don't know what that looks like now with COVID, but maybe it's like a Zoom classroom. But mine didn't require that. So, and I didn't have any issues when I was first job hunting, probably back in 2016, with finding a Hagwon at least that would take me with Tefl. Like they were totally fine with just the Tefl certification. Most of them are totally fine if you just have a bachelor's degree. It doesn't even have to be in like education, English, teaching English as a foreign language, like nothing. They're cool with any of that. So
yeah, like you could do any kind of bachelor's, and then they're fine with it. You could have a bachelor's in education or in English, and that might help you a little bit more. But any bachelor's, I think, I mean, I haven't run into any situation where they've disregarded any kind. Like if you have that schooling, then you're good to go.
Right. And it can be to your advantage if you want to teach a subject that's very STEM or math specific. Like if you want to teach like biology and you have a biology degree, that's very much in your favor versus if you just have an education degree. So don't think that you have to have education in order to teach. You can just be an expert in your field, and the Tefl certificate will just demonstrate that you can actually teach what you're an expert in. But that's all. Like you have an English degree, Lauren. I think you would do great teaching kids. I tell Lauren this all the time.
She does. And I love it. It's really sweet. But there's a lot of different like online programs though, along with the EPIC and the Hagwons and all that stuff. Like you mentioned Search Associates. one day when we were calling. So what is Search Associates?
Search Associates is kind of like a job placement agency, but they work almost exclusively with international schools. And in Asia, many schools will tell you they are an international school. They will be the international school of blah, blah, blah. But in order for you to be a part of Search Associates or like ISS Schroll, which is another big international school search engine, you actually have to be like accredited and approved by certain bodies of organizations that do that. So I went through Search Associates because I knew that I already had a teaching license. And so that's kind of like a minimum requirement to teach at an international school. And usually that's because of the visa process. So at least
there's different requirements.
Yes, there are a couple of different visas. And I don't know if they're different for international schools or in Korea at least, but there usually is now because it's so competitive now and lots of people want to teach. They tend to pile on the requirements now. So now it's more attractive for you to have a teaching license and 2 years of experience to be competitive at an international school. If you're a new teacher, like I'm a completely new teacher. So for me, I really wanted to start off with like finding a teaching position, but I ended up having to do an intern position because most international schools won't take a new teacher with no experience. So that's just something to consider. Like, I know it is really crazy to me, but like I said, it's so competitive to go to South Korea and Japan that they've upped the requirements, just to narrow down the field. But like you said, I had my eyes super set on South Korea, and the job that happened to work out was an international school in Tokyo. So now I've had to like switch gears. It is amazing. And I was on the fence about it for a long time because I was like, well, I don't know if I want to go to Japan. But then I was like, I actually turned down a job in South Korea as an intern because I knew that the pay was not what I wanted it to be. So as an intern, you normally make half of what a teacher would make, which does not sound like a significant amount until you like break it down. Then you're like, oh, you're not making a whole bunch. You're not terrible. You're not doing terribly at all. And for the benefits that I get in this position, it's been worth it because I get free housing with half utilities paid, which is huge because Tokyo's cost of living, even in the suburbs, is a little bit high.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the intern position in Korea, is there an opportunity to even become a teacher in those schools? Like, is that like an entry level and then you work your way up, or do they just hire out?
I think it depends on the school. The school that I went to, I actually asked that question in the first interview. And I remember it factored heavily into my decision because she said there were 10 interns. So I was like, wow, that's a lot of interns, number one.
It is.
And she said 2 of them eventually were hired as teachers the following year. And I'm like, that is a terrible percentage. I'm not a math person, but I'm not going to go to a school where I think I only have a 20% chance of being a teacher if I like that school. So that was part of the reason I decided not to go further in that interview process. And the school I'm at now, they made it very clear that they only take teachers with 5 years of experience minimum. So that was already decided for me. It was going to be a 1-year position. So
and that way you don't get your hopes up. And also that way you're not like waiting and like banking on it for like years too. You're not like kind of wasting those years as an intern. Like, am I going to get this position? Am I not? And actually, that kind of brings me to this point about the difference in when school years start in Asia versus in the U.S. Our U.S. school year is usually August to May or June, roughly. And school in Asia tends to be year-round. So September and March or February are usually the big hiring dates. So if you're looking for a position in Korea, at least, I know that most of the start dates will be around September or I think February. Oh, yeah. For like fall
maybe
and
March.
Winter semesters. Or spring.
So you don't get the whole long summer, but you tend to get longer breaks throughout the year because there is no like long summer. And that is something to keep in mind because there are so many moving components in applying for a position in Korea. So like Korea requires an apostilled background check and an FBI background check. If you're going the cheapest route possible and you want to just get your fingerprints done somewhere local to you and send them to the FBI, the Department of State, that takes up to 8 weeks. And then you have to get it like apostilled. So that takes another up to 8 weeks. So nowadays there are expediters. You can do this much quicker. The pandemic has slowed down the apostille process. And I know that because I sent a document to be apostilled last month, and who knows when it'll get back to me. One day.
Oh gosh. Yeah, one day. We'll see.
Something to keep in mind for the E2 visa process in any teaching job in Korea would be that FBI background check, the apostilled copy of your bachelor's degree. So that also has to be authenticated. An apostille is just an authentication from our government that says,
and all
yes,
that costs
this is
money too.
Yeah, just in case you didn't think this was complicated enough, it all costs money. And the faster you need it, the more money it will cost.
Yeah, of course.
So just keep that in mind as well. I think we're going to do a blog about this because this is just, we could go on and on.
This is a lot of information. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have a question and then we'll keep going to the visa stuff. But you mentioned that the international schools are have more rigorous kind of qualifications for them than like programs like EPIC that do public schools. What's the difference between an international school over in Korea and Japan versus like a public school?
An international school usually is a private school. So the parents will most of the time pay tuition, or if they are a nonprofit international school, they won't. But most of the time it's kind of like the equivalent of a private school. A lot of them have IB curriculum, which is not the curriculum that we have in America in standard schools. We have the core curriculum. That's what we call the American standard education. So the school I happen to be going to in Tokyo does actually have that core curriculum. So it's not an IB school. If you were set on going to an IB school and getting experience there, that would be another roadblock. It's even more difficult to get into an IB school because they tend to want you to have a bachelor's in education and also teaching experience, IB teaching experience. So there are many layers. It's just like job hunting in America. And I think I mentioned you would be creating a lot of lessons if you were to go to a public school in Korea and teach English.
Yes, so you did.
It's a different layer of expectations, I would say. So that's kind of the difference between like the international.
Do they speak English there at the international schools?
I believe most of them do. My international school, yes. Everyone, like in terms of the staff and the students, everyone speaks English, yes. So
that's so nice. So that's a little bit of a stress reliever then, like going over to a whole new country. And in these public schools, you have to learn the language to be able to communicate with anyone, probably. Right. But in international schools, at least that burden is lifted a little bit. We still need to learn the language if you go over there just out of respect. But at least when you go to work, you don't have to worry about messing up the language or anything like that.
Yeah, I feel strongly about that too. If you really are adamant about going to a country, put a little bit of effort into learning the language. Don't be American. Don't be stereotypical American and just like go over there as a tourist. I think you might find it a little difficult because I have read through many forums, many forums. Remember, I've been looking into this for like a decade now. So most of the people who have very bad experiences teaching abroad were not flexible enough or were not aware enough of what they were getting into. So be aware and be flexible because your negative experiences will come from not asking enough questions or the right questions in the interview process. And then not like doing a lot of research about where you're going and what you want to do and how you want to do it. All of those are very important because this is like, it's not an impulse decision to go and teach abroad. Like it requires a lot of thought. But that being said, you have done a lot of research into the JET program in Japan. So tell us what you have found out about the JET program, Lauren.
Well, I haven't done too much research on the JET program. I applied. So the application process is a lot like EPIC, where it's a lot of tabs. You have to have, 2 references. You have to have an essay written. But I think what's different with Japan or with JET is, and I can't remember with EPIC, but I think EPIC might ask for your documents, or might tell you to make sure you have these documents and get them ready during the application process, when JET doesn't do that.
Okay.
I think that there's a little difference in when EPIC versus JET has you get your documents ready. Because with
that
JET,
might be true.
Yeah. Well, so I also I'm actually employed right now by Interact.
Yay!
Which is is a lovely program. But as you can tell, I'm in America right now. So the whole story with that is, this time last year, I was applying for Interact because there was 2 programs. It was Interact and JET that I was applying for. I didn't get into JET. I think it's because I applied a little bit later, maybe. I don't know. I have a little bit of a theory that they take people from certain regions, they spread it out from certain regions, just kind of first come, first serve a little bit. But anyway, that's just a theory. There's no sources to back that. But so I didn't get into JET, but I got in for an interview with Interact, and they liked me. The guy literally told me, he was very, very kind on our phone interview. It was really nice. We had a good conversation, but he was kind of like, "You're not qualified, but I like your energy, so I'm going to move you on to the next part."
Oh my God.
He was like, "You're not qualified at all." And I was like, I know, but I got the enthusiasm. He was like, "You're right."
But now you are qualified, so,
Yeah, now I am qualified a little bit. Yeah. So, so the interview process for that went you get accepted, and then they set up a phone interview. We have the phone interview, goes really well. From there, we have you have to answer a bunch of questions and stuff, and then you have to start getting stuff ready and for this seminar type of interview. It's kind of crazy. So I mean, this time last year we were in pandemic, right? So usually you're supposed to go somewhere and have this seminar. It's usually a hotel. And then everyone comes to this hotel. I think that JET is similar in how they do their interview process, but this is my experience with Interact. I'm just going to preface that. So, the guy on the phone interview, he said, "You might be going to Chicago." I live in Columbus, Ohio. He's like, you might be going to Chicago to do this thing. Is that okay? And I was like, dang, that's a 6-hour drive. I love Chicago.
Oh my God.
I would do it. But I would like it if I didn't have to. And he was like, okay, we'll try to do something in Columbus then. And luckily there was enough people in Columbus that were, that made it to the second round of the Interact program to be able to have someone from the Interact company come out and do this seminar interview with us. But of course, like I said, pandemic. So it ended up being all online. And they told me to book out the whole entire day for this.
Wow.
Right.
That's
It's a Saturday. They said book out your whole entire Saturday. Because it started the crack of dawn. It was 8 or 7 or 8. Yeah. And then so you would go to this place, but this was just a Zoom call. So it was actually on Hangouts. It wasn't even Zoom. So we get on the Hangouts. And it's about 7 or 8 other people on this call, along with this woman from Interact who was incredibly nice. She was so fun. I loved her personality. She went over there and taught for a little bit, and then she was part of the company. I mean, worked her way up in the company to do this, right? So she was giving a seminar about basically the culture shock, about the company, everything, the ins and outs of all of it, right? What we'll be doing, how much we'll get paid, the housing supplement, all of it, right? The transportation, how everything works. And then she would go into culture too, a little bit about Japan. And then, you know, we did like a little introduction. Then she went into that. She asked us questions. And then from there, see, and this is like where it kind of gets a little tricky, because it's like, I don't know how it would be in real life, or not in real life, but in the physical world, I guess. But we had like a time slot after that. So for a one-on-one interview with her. So, you know, I signed up for a time slot, and then I just like, I got off the group call, and then I just waited around until my time. And then I jumped back on the call when it was my time to have a one-on-one interview with her. And then it was just me and her. She asked me a bunch of questions. I did good on, it was like all the normal interview questions. The only question I messed up on was what are two things that like are like, what are two good traits about yourself? And then what are two bad traits about yourself? And I was like, wait, what?
That's hard.
I know, that was a hard one. But anyway, so that went well. And then after that, the final part in this, which I think that what happens in the physical world is you would have the seminar, and then you would have this like teaching part. And then at the very end, you have the one-on-one interviews. But so what we did though was we had to film a lesson plan, and they gave us a bunch of lesson plans like in an email that we can like pick and choose from, and we just had to reenact that lesson plan basically.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like it had like 4 parts to it, so you just memorize it, and then you have to make a board, and then it's like a little I just had like a whiteboard from the dollar store that I drew on. Yeah, so you have to have a visual, right? So I had that, put that on my wall, and then I just recorded myself doing that little lesson plan for about like 10 minutes or so. And then I sent that to her but usually you would be there like with the whole group, and you would like do the lesson plan to the group. So that's how that interview process goes. Yeah. It's kind of nerve-wracking. I was really happy that it was during a pandemic and I didn't have to actually do like a lesson plan.
That is very scary. Like if you've never taught, that's super scary. Right?
So that's how that went. And then from there I got accepted. And then the visa stuff started. And the visa stuff is actually, I think, different than the Korea stuff, because I never had to get my bachelor's degree. What's it called?
Apostilled.
Yeah, apostilled. I never had to get it apostilled. And I didn't have to do any like fingerprints or anything. I had to pay $20 for a background check. From this sketchy third-party website, but
oh my God,
you got to do what you got to do, and then transcripts, and then the hold on, I have it up here. We needed ID photos, so that was the visa photo, which is different. If you're in America, we don't really have those kind of. And then you have to send them your resume, but it has to be a certain way. Like I had to take my resume from its original formatting and write it in like a whole different way for them.
Oh, wow.
Because of how the COE works, I guess. And which COE means Certificate of Eligibility.
Yes.
So that's what you're getting all these documents for, that so that they can hold on to them and then give them back to you. But so then I had to write a resume about like all the schools that I've been to, starting with elementary school, and then the passport. I needed a copy of that, diploma, photocopy, and then a photocopy of any certifications that you have. But the certifications were optional, right?
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so that was my experience with my program, the interviewing process with that, and then the visa process too, which is crazy that I didn't have to get. Mine wasn't as intense as like the Korean one.
Yeah, I think it's just like different requirements by Korea. Like Korea wants everything authenticated. Like that's just who they are. So like, because for my school, the international school that I'm going through the visa process with now too, I didn't have to do any of that either. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Much easier.
It's a little bit easier, right?
Yeah.
So, but the thing with Interact though, and if you're thinking about this program, if you're debating between this program and JET, the difference is JET is with the big cities, like we were talking about with Epic. JET would be what Epic is for Korea, right? In Japan. Interact would be what the other program, what was it called? J or G something.
Oh, like the Hagwons?
No, the other program aside from Epic.
Gepic?
That's rural. Yes, it would be like that. That's what Interact would be for Japan. So it's focused on the rural areas in Japan. And it's separated into a couple different companies within the big country of Japan. So it's just kind of like categories, right? So I was put into northern Japan. So that's kind of like just above Tokyo and up, right? Everything, that's where that section of the company, that's where they handle, right? But the thing is, they don't tell me my placement until what it was supposed to be until a month before I actually left. And I was actually supposed to be like out of the country like now.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But like because of the pandemic, of course, I don't even know. And right now, as we're filming this, there are currently restrictions on crossing the border, especially for Americans in Japan.
Right.
So, they can't get anyone over there necessarily, I guess, is what I'm understanding from all the emails. And it's just like a whole crazy kind of experience because they're trying to get some people over there, but they're saying that some people might have to wait until the next wave of people we can get over there. And it's just a whole mess in and of itself because of this. But yeah, I don't even know, like right now we're in the middle of March and I don't know where my placement is. The email that they sent, and this is no fault on them. They're just working with what they're playing with, but they were like, don't sign any, don't like sign off on any leases. Don't, sell whatever, like don't change your living situations just yet because we don't know if we're going to have this for you. Wow. Basically.
And yeah, I think
so.
The pandemic has definitely affected job hunting this year because even I was, looking at a couple of different places like I normally do to job hunt, and the pickings were few and far between. Like there were very few intern positions. Yeah. For this one, because I applied like directly with the school. Basically, it was through Search Associates, but you send them a cover letter. That's kind of how it works with Search Associates. Okay. You find a position you want, and then you contact the school about it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes you're like sending messages to the void. The school's never going to get back to you. Yeah. So this one happened to work out. And it's a lot of effort because you have to send a cover letter and your resume and for Search Associates, you have to build the profile before you reach out to a school about a job. So it requires a lot of time and effort for you to fill out all the sections you need to, get the references you need to, have an interview with like your Search Associate like person. So everyone gets a person. So as an intern candidate, I had a specific person who works with intern candidates. And she was the one who had to like vet my application basically. Wow. And I had to do all that before I could get access to jobs, like to see what they look like. Also, Search Associates and ISS Roll are both sites where if you are a teacher and you're looking for a teaching position because you have the qualifications to do that, it's a paid site. You have to pay to use those websites. That's what I was going to ask. That's the one that you have to pay. And it's like a hefty amount. It's a handful. Yeah, I think it's $200 on Search Associates. If you're an intern candidate and you find an intern job, it's free. So
that is nice.
Other things to keep in mind. But the whole process with Search Associates can be very lengthy. And like I said, it can be a little bit, it requires a lot of follow-up on your part if you're really interested in a job and you feel like you're qualified to like continually message them and be like, hello, I'm still interested, But again, the pandemic complicated things. Even now, my school has started the visa process, even though I won't start until August. So they're doing it just to be safe because like Lauren said, there are travel restrictions right now. this segues into my other thought, which I thought was important, which is deciding. We mentioned how the school years are kind of different. They're usually September and like March is when the start dates are. So that affects you in your job hunt, because schools, you have to keep in mind if you're thinking about South Korea, the documents, like we said, take a long time to process. So you have to keep in mind, you've got to start like at least 3 or 4 months in advance preparing documents if you want this to be like a very timely thing and you want to be the person who gets to like look at the best job opportunities right as they drop. So if that's something that you want, like start preparing 4 months before September or March.
Yeah.
Because that's when you can get everything together. For South Korea, at least. I think Japan requires less, so you don't necessarily need to start job hunting so early, but just something else to keep in mind, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, after you get all your stuff together, like after, you do all the jumps and the hoops and all that of getting everything and you have everything, then you give it to the company and then they hold it, like you said, they hold it until they give it back to you. And then when they give it back to you, then you have to hurry, and usually with the company that I'm with, you'd have to hurry and you have to go to your what is it? Your
embassy? Consulate?
Embassy, that's the word. Yes, your embassy, your consulate. Yeah. So, and that might not be in your city. Like I live in Columbus, Ohio. So that is actually, I'm going to have to go to Detroit for this, which is like a 3-hour drive. It's not that bad, but it's something that like I need to plan for. It's not like I can just do that after work. Right. So that's also something that needs like an extra little bit of planning. And then after you do that, I believe you're done with the process.
Okay.
Right?
I think so. Once you get your visa, I think you're set. And that's just a matter of if you have to book a plane ticket, booking it. Or if you don't have to, then, or if it's already been booked, you're all good. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. I don't know what about that reminded me of this, but it did. So with Interact, because you're in a rural area, and I would guess that this is the same for a rural company in Korea as well, you're going to have to drive. So that's like one of the big things that they ask you when I was interviewing is like, are you okay with driving in a foreign country? Like, do you have a driver's license in America and all this stuff? So that's something to be kind of watchful for, and like just keep in mind that you might be driving, you might have to pay rent on a car, which my company, they paid like half of the rent or something like that.
Okay.
But, that might be another cost. And you have gas, and then you're just driving in a different country. So the way that works like license wise is you have to like the day before you go overseas. And this is what they told me to do. Basically like the day before you get on your flight, or as close as possible as you could get it, you have to go get your international driver's license from the BMW or whatever it's called here in America. After you do that, which I'm assuming also costs money, this is very costly kind of, it's just like the little things that add up, but you go and do that. And then you have that for a year. That's good for 1 year. So once that expires, you can't drive in Japan anymore, basically. So that's why they tell you to get it as soon as you're about to get on that flight, because it's a lot more complicated of a process over in Japan. Whereas here it's a little more simple. So that's why they ask you to do that. So that's another little thing just to keep in mind if you're doing something that's more in a rural area, or if anyone in your interviewing process says you might have to drive, that's something to keep in mind. Right.
If there's any takeaway about like this whole episode, it's just there's so many things to keep in mind.
Yes, there's a lot of research to do.
There is. But I mean, as long as I think you have a good idea of what you want, the internet is a great resource. You can find many things, and we'll put many links in the description box for you to check out. But there are tons of ways to like find information about schools and jobs and recruiters and visa processes. It's all out there. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's like I feel bad though, because it's like you have this you had this plan for so long, almost a decade now, right? And it's like now, right? Like as the pandemic hits and things start getting crazy,
right?
You're like really qualified. You have teaching experience. You have your teaching certificate. You have a Tefl certificate. You have all this knowledge. Like you've done all this research. Like you are the like prime perfect candidate for these positions. And, you know, you go on Search Associates and there's like a handful of positions, right?
Yeah.
So it could also be timing if you can't find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I mean, it worked out really well for you though, Alisha, where you found this amazing opportunity. You don't have to drive. It's just a 4-minute walk, I think, or like a 5-minute walk or something like that.
I will say that a lot of the schools will find you housing that's very close to the school. So
that's amazing. It's going to be such a good experience for you. I'm so happy for you and I'm so excited for you.
I'm really excited and I'm also really scared because I don't know any Japanese. So that's like my next hurdle right now. Lauren will tell you. We were talking yesterday about books like to learn Japanese like on and off throughout the day. So I'm excited. It'll be a challenge. It'll be very long hours and lots of work. But I think at this moment, I had to be less picky. I really was not going to take this job to begin with, but like Lauren said, pandemic, we can't all be picky, you know, right now. So
yeah,
we'll take what we can get.
And it'll get you over there, which will open up more doors in Korea too.
That is true.
Anywhere, really.
That's true. I did have to see this as a stepping stone. This isn't totally a 1-year position. I will not be here for more than a year. I don't know if I'll be in Japan for more than a year, but it will be a stepping stone for another position. So that's like one of the main reasons I took it, because I was like, yes. And also, before I forget, pets are very hard to travel with. So if you have the intention of bringing a pet, it would be very difficult for you to travel with them because I cannot bring my cat with me to Japan. So if you do not have people to keep your pet for a year, it might be very difficult for you to find a position as well, because most housing in South Korea and Japan that is school provided will not take animals. So one other tidbit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something very important to remember. If you've got a little friend, a little pet friend at home, you may have to let them go for a year or so, however long they're gone. But, you know, you can always, like, there's always ways, though. You could always go over there and then, you know, find your own housing.
Right.
And then be able to bring them over or come back or, you know, there's a bunch of different ways to work things out, too.
Okay. With that note, I feel like we've completely exhausted this topic. We've like talked about so much. I'm still trying to remember. I'm still trying to remember the why. I'm like, all right, why? Why are we doing this again? Ah, yes, because we wanted to, right?
Yes, because we wanted to. It's fun. It's fun. And it'll be well worth it. We'll be doing our podcast with you in Japan here soon. Yeah. So that'll be so fun.
That's
you can tell us about all your experiences and all your adventures. It'll be awesome.
That'll be fun.
All right. So on that note, we will see you guys in the next episode of the Purple Bloom podcast.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.